there were some guys that I knew who were starting startups to make money. Like, oh, hang on, I think I can make some money here. And that, for me, is a secondary thing. You make money by accident by doing amazing things with your startup. If you've started something because you think there's some sort of little gambling loophole you could work on, I'm not into those sort of things. Look, if you're in a startup and you're in Australia, the way to do it is one of the founders goes to America, hires a number two, then both guys sell.
They're doing 1 to 2 meetings a week. I'm like, it's 10 a week minimum. If you do 10 a week, that's 500 a year. At the end of the year, if nobody buys your stuff, then shut your company.
That's the uncomfortable truth.
Who would have thought we'd end up in a podcast studio in Bali when we met 10 years ago?
I know, right? That we met in a little bar in the Duxton Hill.
You have this mantra that everyone should do a startup. I don't know if I always agree with you. Sometimes I do. And I'm doing one again. Why the mantra?
It's look, it's positive bias. I did one and it worked out extremely well. But I speak to a lot of people who did one, and I don't know anyone who regrets, even if it crashed and burned like yours did, like Bambu did. And I've had another startup that we've started that also crashed and burned, and it was, it wasn't great, but it's such a big learning thing. I think everyone should do it. Like you get caught in a corporate job with a corporate salary, and then I think you look around aged 50, which I am next year, and think, Jesus, what should have done something.
You are 50? Jesus Christ, you're going to grow up soon?
I know, right? I keep wondering when it's going to happen. But yeah.
Suddenly you'll be all grown up.
Yes.
When you're 50.
Well, I think, that's one of the things you think about when you're in I'm mentoring startups now, and I have a venture studio that starts startups. And I speak to, and a lot of the guys, when they become founders and CEO of a startup, they've still got this mindset of being in a corporate, and that can manifest in a number of ways. One of them is, look, one of the previous startups I had that did crash and burn, I think there was a thought, oh, there's money somewhere. Corporates always have some money somewhere. There's some money. I was like, there isn't any. Like, if you're in a startup, there is no money unless you make the money. And then you get people sort of thinking, oh, wait a second, where's the boss? Where's the grown up in the room? But when you start a startup, you are the grown up in the room. And you could be, I was 27 when I started Tigerspike. And suddenly I was in charge of everything, whereas if you're in a job, you have somebody else who's the boss. And so it's a real cool thing to do. Like, if you want to suddenly, work out where all the moving parts are.
Or you could do an MBA. It'd be just as good, right?
Yeah, right. Well, I speak to some people about an MBA, and I have people who've done MBAs, and they're good, right? Because I became a chartered accountant, and they teach you about, being a chartered accountant. And I think in the MBA, there's a lot of finance in there, and I forget that people don't know that. And so I think MBAs can be really good things. But generally speaking, if you're going to spend 50 to 100 grand on an MBA, I would start a company. I'd take that 50, start a company, and say, right, I've got a year to hit some milestones. And within a year, if you've got a reasonably good product market fit and you've got some nice revenue growth, you can then either carry on and be profitable, or you can go get some venture capital, right? And then you've suddenly, done something. And that year spent doing that guy will outgun any MBA by a mile.
I was asked after Bambu, do you think you could go back to corporate? And the answer wasn't no, because I couldn't. I was like, you mean go to a job where you get paid and you don't take the risk and you have a salary? Feels like a holiday camp almost, which is unfair, but it is almost like, I did 8 years of learning. Why did Tigerspike work?
I think I was at KPMG for 8 years before Tigerspike, and I was doing okay. I was good at sales, right? So if you're in an accounting firm or sort of one of these big consultancies, there's two ways of getting ahead. One is you can work super hard, and I mean sort of doing all the extra stuff and working really hard, and I didn't really fancy that. The other way is selling. When you're doing your chartered accountancy with KPMG, you do 3 years of exams. I took 5 years to do them, and generally, if you fail them, you're fired. So that's kind of there's a sort of Damocles right over your head of failing the exams. And the reason I didn't get fired, which I should have been, was because I could sell well. I was bringing in a lot of money. So when you looked at who brought in the most money, it was me, and probably who was working the least hard, me again. So I thought, that sounds awesome.
That's a recipe for success.
Exactly.
Let's go.
I had a lot of ideas at KPMG. Let's do this, and this. And then, it was difficult. You can't execute ideas quickly. And so when I had an opportunity to start Tigerspike, I did. And I really wanted to prove myself, right? So I thought, I was never getting the highest grades, right? I just had a big reunion with a load of my old friends from when I was 14. I wasn't the smartest of the friends. I've got plenty of friends who are way smarter. But I wanted to prove that I could, do this, start a company and make it work, prove to myself, prove to everyone else who said I couldn't do it. And then we just kind of got scrappy. I had some two original co-founders, Dean Jezard and Oliver Palmer. And with three of us, Dean was a creative developer. And that's difficult to find. A developer who's also good at design. That's what Dean was. Ollie Palmer just got shit done and worked out how to do things. Came up with innovations that we then took to market. We were the only people who could do certain things. And, we were living in Sydney. We were all 27. And you can live in Sydney quite cheaply if you're on the beach. I know people...
20 years ago, yes. Today, no.
Back then. I had a rich girlfriend. That helped a lot. And we just sold well. Like, I was a good sales guy. And I think people underestimate the value of that, right? If you're in a startup, like I said earlier, there's no money there unless you make that money. So there were a couple of times when Ollie and Dean were like, we got to go do normal jobs. We can't, we haven't got any money. And that's when I would feel really the pressure. And I went out and I think I bullied the guy at Siemens to give us $5,000 to sponsor. I was doing the Sydney to Hobart at the time. And so I said, you've got this new phone that's just come out that's rugged, right? I'm going to do the Sydney to Hobart. Why don't I take this phone with me? And I'm blogging,
This is like 20 years ago.
20 years ago. And we were sending images from the phone during the Sydney to Hobart to the website, to the website of one of the newspapers that we were working with. And we got $5,000. And I went and said to Dean and Ollie, we got $5,000. And so we can't quit. We have to carry on. So there were some times when you really were going to go bust and you sold your way out of it. And that's the only way of surviving. Like, I've been in startups. We were quite close during the end of Bambu. Yeah. And it was frustrating because we had a path of profitability, which was clear, but you can't chop your way to profitability. You cannot. You must sell. And there's a lot of guys, especially the accountants and folks who come in and say, well, we're not profitable, so let's cut costs. Well, no, you have to sell. And you really have to double down on selling and sell your way out of stuff. So, whenever I was sort of crying in the corner at Tigerspike thinking we're going to go bust, which was often, I just got on the phone and sold my ass off. And it worked.
You're this old school, get on the phones and sell. So many people are just like so scared of like, oh my God, I'm going to pick up the phone and get told no. But you must get told no 100 times when you picked up the phone.
I was sort of one for, my selling style is I get quite a few leads that I think are going to be really good. And I just relentlessly pursue them. I don't go big scattergun. And that's maybe a fault of mine. But one of the biggest things we had at Tigerspike was we did the Economist magazine. We put them on iPad. We didn't get the iPhone. I was calling them, and I was calling the head of digital in New York because I was in New York at the time running our New York office. And I said, the iPhone, iPhone apps is a big thing. All the newspapers are doing it. We had big newspaper customers.
What year is this?
This would have been 2008 or 9, something like that, 2008, 2009. We were quite big in newspapers in the early days. So I rang up the Economist and was like, you've got to have an iPhone app. And they just ignored me, basically, the head of digital. And then in the end, I was sort of, sometimes I would talk to my old sales guys at Tigerspike and I'd say, where are we with, client X? It's like, oh, he hasn't got back to me. I was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, and I teach an entrepreneurship class at the Green School with the high school kids. And same thing, I get them to do they're doing little sales. It's like, oh, they didn't get back to me. It's like, email them every single day until they say no, right? You have to. Otherwise, what are you doing? And in fact, I didn't follow that with the economists. What I did in the end, after about 3 months of probably every single week emailing this head of digital, I went and I found the email address of the CEO of the group.
Of the Economist?
Yeah. His name was Andrew Rashbass. And I sent Andrew an email and I was like, iPhone and iPad is going to be huge. You're really missing out on something. I've been emailing your head of digital saying we can do something for you. He hasn't got back to me. And I just want to let you know, this is the last email I'm sending and you're missing something.
And you know what? I got an email. That email that is, you're missing something. This is the last email I'm sending you. Will make people. Did he respond?
He did. And actually he did. The Economist did very well with digital among people who weren't doing so well. And it was probably down to him and his team. And I think he just said, hey, look at these guys. And we did have credibility, right? So we did Haaretz, we did Al Jazeera, we did News Corp, we did the Telegraph in the UK. So at one point we were the big newspaper guys. And it was because of a little innovation we had. We were, Ollie Palmer said, when you were sending lots of SMS messages or MMS messages, it was very expensive to do so. but Ollie found out that it was free to receive them. And so we were able to get people to send pictures to a phone and put them up on, on the internet. This was when YouTube was just coming out as well, right? So, and YouTube was just getting big. And so all of these big newspaper groups were like, wow, you can get people to send user-generated content. And so that was an innovation that we had, which meant we won the DMTG group in London. That's how we opened our London office. And so it helps when I'm thinking about selling, we did have things that were unique.
But do you think you were the only guys who had it, or you, Luke, were just more persistent, and the other dude at ABC company just didn't harass the CEO of The Economist like you did?
We were the first in Australia to have it. And we were innovative with mobile. We were ahead of the game with tech. And then we did some work with Telstra, which is the big carrier over in Australia. And that's how we got Daily Mail.
But how did you get Telstra? By calling, right?
By calling. But the interesting sale that really we opened up 8 offices around the world. So we had New York, San Francisco, London, Dubai, Melbourne, Sydney, Tokyo, and Singapore. And opening up all those offices was always a bit of a battle. It lost a bit of money. It was difficult, except for the one in London, because we had Daily Mail Group was the big customer there. And the reason we won that, I remember I was with Ollie Palmer. We had no money because we never had any money in the beginning. And it was us against 2 or 3 others who could do the same sort of user-generated content via mobile. And I said, and we both said to each other, let's just fly there. And we didn't have the money to do it. So we flew economy from Sydney to London. And then we flew to meet them face-to-face. And we won it. I'm sure if we hadn't met them face-to-face, we wouldn't have won. And there's a company that we've started recently in Melbourne called Minikai, which is an AI company. They're using AI agents to help healthcare and aged care. And I think they're going to be one of the big winners in Australia. And the way they're doing it is Freddie is the head of growth there, and Kyoki's the CEO. And they make a point of flying places. They go and they meet the CEOs of these companies in Brisbane, in Adelaide, up in the Gold Coast, because a lot of these people are in different places. And they've got a really big customer, Bolton Clark, which is one of the biggest aged care suppliers in Australia. And Freddie said he would call up the CEO and he'd say, which one of our health facilities are you at now? Because they had lots of these places.
Or he chases them down.
And Freddie and Kyoki would visit them. Then go and visit the client. They'll go and visit the customers. They'll go visit the frontline carers and ask them questions and things. And that kind of matters. And so I think with the Daily Mail Group, we had a few things. We had a tech which was good, but not totally unique at the time. But we were early movers on it. We had Telstra, which is a big customer in Australia. That was a kind of a nice sort of example. And we showed up face to face. We were young, and I think Annabelle Hembry is the woman that gave us the job. And to this day, I think she sort of sees us like, oh, those are the cool little entrepreneur guys, selling us their stuff. And people like that.
But they do like it. I mean, this is the thing. There's so many startups are going to sit in their room like, so what about this product to this and building stuff? And you just got to run around and tell people. But it's scary.
But you know who normally starts tech startups? Techies. I went and spoke to a university in Australia about all of the tech they're doing within the university. It's run by techies. It's run by researchers. It's run by people who come up with innovations. Those are not the same brains as salespeople. And what I would really, the trouble with sales guys is I don't think they often go into startups because they make quite a lot of money in whatever they're doing, because sales guys...
You can make more money selling big ticket corporate stuff.
Totally. And so I would love more sales guys to come in and be sales-driven CEOs. Luckily with Minikai, Kyoki is a sales-driven CEO. He worked for Deloitte for 5 years before doing AI with them. And Freddie is one of the best young sales guys I've ever seen. So they have a real sales advantage because they do that. But I've seen many, many startups where it's a techie guy who isn't comfortable selling. That doesn't mean he can't sell. Some of our best sales guys were techies originally. But yeah, if you're good at sales, find yourself a techie co-founder and think about what to start. Because it's awesome. You
see, the problem is so I'm sales. I go in, I can sell, but if it's tech, they need a techie guy to deliver it, right? That's the difference. You need someone else to go in there and be like, because if you just wave your hands around, at some point they're going to ask you, what is it?
Yeah.
Show me what it does.
Yeah, you bring the guy in. And luckily, with Kyoki, he is very technically gifted in AI. He's probably one of the best AI guys in Australia. And so he goes in there and they understand immediately, this guy knows what he's talking about. You've really got to understand what you're doing. But you look at Bambu as an example. I don't know if you want to speak about it much, but
all good, man.
Bambu was one of the best, at sales and marketing in the wealth tech industry, like by far. And I think that having a sales-driven leader really lifted the company up. It meant that you could raise money. So that side of the company was gold. I think the one thing that was difficult was there was, you were so great and focused at selling that you didn't necessarily see the tech side as in as much detail as you needed to. And so that, yes, you have to be a sales guy, but there needs to be a bit of overlap, right, between sales and tech. And we had one of our offices had a really sales-driven leader as well. And that office almost went bust because the techie guys were just hiring more techie guys. And the sales guy didn't know, do you really need these guys? And like when if you have a techie guy and he says, I need more staff, no, they don't need more staff. Yeah, maybe a little bit, but they'll ask for 3 guys they can do with 1 guy.
You're famous for this, aren't you? No more software licenses, no more
Nothing.
staff.
But you go into a company, I mean, you said you went into that company and they had like a load of sales software licenses and half people weren't using them.
More than half. They were using 10% of it.
Why are you paying it?
Because they had thought they were going to use it and they brought it and now they can't get out of it.
So we have a friend in common, Ken McHugh, who was my CTO and then later the general manager of Tigerspike Singapore, who's a legend. And, I'll send him, I'll meet some new startup or what startup that's been going for a while, just get their P&L and say, let me see your costs. Let me see all your tech costs. Send it to Ken and be like, well, you don't need to pay this, or this. Why are you paying that, and that? Or if they've got, this is an easy one for everyone. If you're using AWS or Google Cloud, whichever one you're using, call the other guy up or call them up and say, look, if you're using AWS, call up and say, hey, Google's been knocking down my door trying to get my business. Can you give me some free stuff?
But that's sales as well.
Yeah.
That's the same thing.
Yeah, they'll give you free, it's everything needs to be negotiated. And like one thing we did, which I liked at Tigerspike, is we paid the little guy quickly, right? If we had other startups we were using, we paid them quickly. We paid the cleaning ladies quickly. But if you had some big guy like Google, we didn't pay them. We didn't pay them. And so I'd get startup guys asking me this, oh, when should you pay them? You don't pay them until they scream. When they're screaming and about to turn you off. You've still got quite a while before they actually turn you off. So just wait. I mean, God, we had Aussie government. We owed them over $1 million at Tigerspike. And, we had, payment plans. Well, like the last thing you do when they say, you need to pay us is say, our payment plan. We missed 3 of our payment plans, and we had a guy running, Alex Burke, who was running the Sydney office, who was very good at sort of smoothing this. But Christ, if they'd said we want all the money back, we were bust. We were so close to being bankrupt so many times. And really when it got down to the wire, it was now that's when you panic and the founders get on the phone. Luckily at Tigerspike, all the founders could sell pretty well. And so you need that. If you're a founder and you think that you can hire a sales guy, not in the early days. You cannot in the early days, you can't do it.
These founders who say that they can't sell. There's people I meet and they're like, I'm not a salesman. Because they don't think that they can hustle and talk, but they can sell. Because they can just go out and tell people passionately about what they do. But do you think all founders have to be salespeople?
They definitely have to, yes. But I think what you said there is actually kind of insightful, because if you've started your own company, you are passionate about the company. Because you're doing, and if you're not, what are you doing? Right?
Yeah, you're not doing it for a regular paycheck, that's for sure.
No shit. I remember I called you after you'd started Bambu, I think 2 years later, and I said, are you working way harder, way happier, way broker?
Yes. Yes, and yes.
You are in startup.
Yeah, it continued for the rest of the time.
Yeah. So listen, by definition, if you start your own company, I always, my company, Mangosteen, my venture studio, starts and invests in purpose-driven founders. But I think it's difficult not to be a purpose-driven founder.
It has to be by design. You're not going to be like, I don't really care, so I'm going to work 18 hours a day and get no pay.
But actually what I have found, there were some guys that I knew who were starting startups to make money. Like, oh, hang on, I think I can make some money here. And that, for me, is a secondary thing. You make money by accident by doing amazing things with your startup. So if you've started something because you think there's some sort of little gambling loophole you could work on, I'm not into those sort of things. But if you're a purpose-driven founder and you're super happy about what you're doing, then you're happy and you can talk about it. You want to talk about it. It's all you can talk about because you're working 24 hours a day. You're not doing anything else. And like when I spoke to Annabelle Hembry over at Daily Mail Group, she knew that me and Ollie loved this company. This was our company. You're going to go above and beyond. Like if you're in a corporate and you find a little new startup, they're going to work their ass off for you. Like that's the diamond in the rough. If you find those guys, and it won't continue because if they're good, they'll grow and then they'll have growing pains, which we all had. But early stage startups, yes, the founder has to sell. And one of the biggest sort of things I say to founders when I'm on sort of my calls with them and they're talking about, the future of their company. And whenever I hear a founder saying, I've got to hire a sales guy to increase sales, like, don't do that. Hire an admin guy. Look at your day and whatever you're doing that day that isn't sales, hire someone to do those things. And by the way, those are the things that are dull, right? It's so you can hire a really efficient EA to do those things and free you up to do more sales. And that's what you have for the first 3 years. I would say you must, as founders,
you almost always see like I hired a salesperson and they didn't produce anything. It's because they didn't have the right marketing, they didn't have a CRM, and we've talked about this EA sales lead manager. I'm going to say most people don't do it. We've talked about it so much because here's the reality. Let's imagine me and you, all we did all day long was sell nothing else. We would sell shit tons of everything. But what we wouldn't be good at is all the follow-up. Because so what I've noticed is in a startup, the founder runs around, that's what I did, and creates chaos by selling. If you're good and you sell, and then you realize you're creating this big pile of opportunity. But if it's not.
And Bambu had hyper growth, but it didn't have someone who could handle that. And so that, and that's not easy to find. That's a good tech guy, that's a good finance guy, that's a good ops person. That can be all the same person. But you need to, and by definition, in a startup, you haven't got all those, not everything's in line. It's chaotic. And so you're hiring an outside sales guy. Like I listened to this podcast of Harry Stebbings, and he had the guy from Datadog.
The 60 million to 1 billion ARR podcast or something. Jesus
and that
Christ,
guy had a thing that ran like a machine, right? And then I thought, that's the setup you want for growth. You don't have that in a startup in the beginning. And because it's chaotic, you can't hire a gun sales guy. And the hardest hires we ever had at Tigerspike was sales. And there was a cautionary tale I often would tell about a competitor that we had. And they raised a bunch of money. And they said, all right, we're going to go and dominate in America, because that's what the VC told them they should be doing. Especially Aussie VCs. They'll tell you, go to America. I understand why. It's a bigger market and so on. But they hired 2 sales guys in 4 cities in America. So 2, 4, 6.
2 in each, 8 altogether.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Because they wanted to dominate. After like 1 year and $1 million later, all those guys were fired because they didn't manage to sell. The way to look, if you're in a startup and you're in Australia, the way to do it is one of the founders goes to America, hires a number 2, then both guys sell. The other mistake you could make is try and build tech too quickly. That was the next thing they did. And they blew through all their money, went bust. But sales was always the hardest thing. And I've seen many, many people when they're crying into their tea thinking, my startup isn't working because they need revenue. And they think, I need to find somebody else who can bring me the revenue. No, it has to be you. And because you can't, there's nothing else you can do. And I think that lasts longer than people think. I think that's a year at least. It depends on what the revenues are, but you need to be ready for that good sales guy. You can't just hire the best sales guy with loads of experience somewhere else, because he'll come into your thing and it'll be a disaster. And so it's my sweet spot that I love so much is going from 0 to the first 2 or 3 million in revenue. I can do that all day long. I did that in 8 different markets, all those Tigerspike offices.
And
then I'm kind of like, but then you have the resources to get people who enjoy the process and who can set up a sales team. So, I mean, the great thing about Minikai, to use as an example, because I've been talking to those guys a lot lately, is, they'll have a sales team of, Kyoki can sell, Freddie's a great sales guy. They'll hire a sales assistant soon. And that little group of 3 should be able to bring in, I would think, 10 million in revenues. Just those 3 guys. Then once you do that, you can hire another 3.
If you get to 10 million in revenue, everything's good, right? But if I help with those guys. They're setting it up in a way that makes sense. There's a founder who can sell, Freddie who's great, a sales lead manager, rinse and repeat, do it repeatedly. But on this rinse and repeat thing, so I'm helping a bunch of B2B startups. They're doing, and I have this thing, 1 to 2 meetings a week. Like I was pushing Freddie the other day. I'm like, it's 10 a week minimum. And here's the reason. If you do 10 a week, that's 500 a year. At the end of the year, if nobody buys your stuff, then shut your company. It's pretty obvious. But I meet companies like, oh, my product doesn't work. And they've done 50 meetings in total.
That's the uncomfortable truth.
It is.
And in fact, we're just closing a seed raise for Minikai. And Freddie ran that, right? I helped him, but he ran that. And he went much more broad than I went. So at Tigerspike, when we raised money, we had interest from somebody and we thought, oh, let's reach out to some other people. And we did reach out, but not to as many. Yeah. And in fact, we cast quite a broad net. And then we got some really interested people and it was very clear who was interested. And so we ended up with some reasonably nice competitive tension there. And it was a numbers thing. And people don't want to hear this because it means they have to work really hard. And there's a story that I tell my kids sometimes is when I went to school at United World College in Singapore. And I didn't want to do my homework. It was the worst. I remember when I got a job, I thought, oh, no homework. Oh, that was the best thing about a job, no homework, because I never did my homework. And then I got in trouble. And it was terrible. And it was a stress and I hated it. It was really, really kind of weird that I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And then
you intellectually could do it.
Oh yeah, I could. Yeah,
you just didn't.
I didn't do it.
You just didn't.
I was playing my guitar, or fucking around, or whatever else. And so my dad called up the principal and said, "After school, Luke goes into this room, and you close the door, and he can go home on the activities bus an hour later, but he stays in that room. I don't care what he does; he's in the room." And then I was in the room. I was like, "Oh fuck you, Dad!" And so I had to spend an hour every day in this little room. This was before phones, so there was nothing to do. And I got so bored that I did my work. And I was on top of everything like a machine, like I was flying. I couldn't believe how ahead of everything I was. And then I felt sort of super confident, so I didn't go into the room anymore. And sure enough, fell right back into the hole. And people don't do things, right? I work with a woman called Rebecca Yick, who is, I call her Beck Magic, because she seems to just get lots of, she was at Tigerspike with me for 10 years, and now she's working with me at Mangosteen. But she just does, and her secret is doing work. She's doing work. And, I know that you spent a few hours with Freddie where you're on Zoom, he's on Zoom, and you spend an hour selling. He told me that hour is more productive than his whole day, right? And he is a very productive sales guy. Like, he's one of the top guys. If you're not a top guy, you just don't do the work. And I had a company I was, on the board of, and they're like, oh, what are we doing? We need more sales. And I'm like, you got to work harder. It's like, and the founders was like, stop just saying work harder, Luke. It's got to be something else. And I was like, it isn't. More than half of it, I think, is. And you get rejected all day. You see it in my high school class. Like, someone will tell them no, and they're like, oh, if you're 14, and it's jarring. But that hour that you did with Freddie, that's more efficient than a whole day of selling.
But that's like but you know why I do it?
It's like locking me in the room. That's what it is.
But it's me in the room as well. Yeah. It's putting myself in the room. Because I say to Freddie, because he's 20, is he 19, 20, 21, 19? I say to Freddie, dude, like, we're both committed to just doing our stuff. And what we do is, I'm like, yeah, I've done 10. Yeah, you've done 6, you suck. But the point is, we hold each other accountable to not doing other stuff. The minute it's over, I check LinkedIn, I'm on my phone, I go and get a coffee. Sales, I get a bit of crap on LinkedIn for this because I'm like, we can just do more calls. Like, just do more. And some people give me crap. They're like, no, but it's not that easy. No, it is easy. Like, if you reach out to everybody, it is.
I didn't know what to do. How am I going to get my homework done? It was impossible. I couldn't do it. It was impossible. Putting me in a room, that was it. And the sales stuff that you're saying is even more so. I mean, look, it's the gym, right? I used to have one of my greatest friends. My parents called him Daniel Brain. His name is Daniel Ramot. He's running a company called Via in America,
which has done rather well.
It's a massive unicorn. He's done extremely well. I've invested in him, thankfully, because he's my best investment at Mangosteen. And we used to run around Central Park every Wednesday, and you didn't want to get out of bed at 5 a.m, but I knew he was. And he knew I was. And so we used to run once a week, and he was working at DE Shaw at the time, and I think he saw me we just raised money at Tigerspike, and I'm sure he was thinking, why is my dumb friend doing this and I'm still working at DE Shaw, for extremely a lot of money. And
good money at DE Shaw.
And not doing very much. He was D.E. Shaw was trying to win a Nobel Prize. Daniel was running supercomputers doing his folding proteins because he was PhD from Stanford in neuroscience. So he started this company, and it did extremely well. But I think that people underestimate just how difficult it is to do something, get up and run. If you're running in the park alone, you're not getting up and running in the park alone. If you do, but if you're trying to do your homework, you never do your homework. If somebody else is saying do it, you do it. And that's where I love these, little things you're doing with Freddie. Like, it reminded me of Soul Cycle because, like you were saying, nobody cycles their own, no one goes into the gym and cycles. And then suddenly Soul Cycle came up, that spin class. I was like, what is spin class? Riding an exercise bike. Why do you like it? Because everyone else is doing it. There's a leaderboard, which is, you saying you haven't sold as much as me. And I think there's something in that. And there's something, especially with sales teams. And at Tigerspike, we had sort of 4 founders and then we had 2 other guys. So we had sort of 6 main guys and we all sold. And when we outsold each other, we kind of jabbed each other in the ribs. There was competition. And that's a real, and it's friendly. And I speak to Freddie about it. And I know that you're in there kind of giving him hell for, and he did it to me when we were doing this seed raise. He was like, how many people have you reached out to? And I reached out to all the American VCs. Hardly any of them said yes. And all the Aussie ones that he did. And I think they liked that he was a young, excited guy,
But this is it. This is the point. Like, if Freddie reaches out to 100 guys with a good product, or 500, and they all say no, then your product sucked. But most people stop because it's hard. We've talked about it. It was your idea. I will credit it officially on the show with your idea. I think the Soul Cycle of sales. Because quite often when I get on a call with people, afterwards they're like, oh, I feel better now. I think I can go and sell. Because they know what to do. You tell people, I have something that can help you. I have something that can help you.
But like me, when I was in the room doing all my homework, and then I thought, I can do this, it drops off. You need, even if, I can imagine if you're a young sales guy and you're thinking, Jesus, my sales soul cycle's coming up with Ned and, he's going to punch me in the face. And you just feel like, I was at one of my startups I was on the board of didn't have weekly sales meetings. It's like, what are you talking about? They had 2 sales teams, one in New Zealand, one in Australia. And I was like, hey, Aussie guys, can you beat New Zealand? Well, we don't know what their total number is. Well, find that out and beat them.
But then, okay, and we only have a few more minutes, and then we should do a long form one time. Honestly, we should sit here for a day and just talk shit. I spoke to the same company in New Zealand. The sales meetings idea is so many sales meetings is everybody turning up going, so what did you do this week? And that's not the point. It should be, what is motivating you to get stuff done? I have this idea. Every lead has a task. You have something to do. Why didn't you do your stuff? Not in a, hey, you suck kind of way. What can we all do to make everybody do all their tasks? Because if everybody followed up on every lead, companies would work. They would.
And as a sales leader, there are guys who are good at sales and there are young guys. We had guys at Tigerspike who thought, when we did that thing with Siemens in the Sydney to Hobart, that was $5,000 and we all cheered and the company survived. Towards the end of it, we were doing $5 million deals. And we had the same sales guys, some of them from the beginning. You've got to give the guys belief that they can do a $100,000 deal, $300,000, $400,000. And to do that, you've got to sell it yourself. And so if someone else in the sales team sells something, the other guy's like, oh, wait, that means that's possible.